Lara Evtakimova, and I will be your moderator for this topic session. This session is being recorded. It will be available with all the materials by the link later. Please feel comfortable asking questions. Put your questions in the chat that you see on the right. We answer them at the end of the presentation. Please let me introduce the speaker. Steve Riley has 20 years of experience in quality assurance, including 15 years in leadership, working in various different sectors and countries. He would like to share his knowledge to help quality assurance leaders find which behaviors and skills are important implemented with clients. I pass the word to Steve. Please, Steve, start the presentation.
Great, thanks very much for that introduction. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Okay, great. So yeah, this presentation and talk is about QA leadership and what the client really wants. So let me just expand a little bit more about myself. So I'm a senior software test engineer at EPAM in the Newcastle office in the UK. So I have up to 20 years experience working in QA, of approximately 15 of those in leadership roles, kind of working through from team leader to head of QA departments and then test manager as well. I feel like I'm in a bit of a unique position at the moment because I have experience of working on both sides. So I've worked on the client side and worked with QA teams, and I've worked on agency and consulting. And certainly with EPAM and my previous experience, I've worked in various different sectors as well and different clients, and worked with a lot of different clients who have given me the unique kind of standing point to see what I think clients want from QA leaders and managers and QA in general. So a short agenda. So there'll be an introduction to the talk. The bulk of this 45 minutes will be around the talk itself and kind of really talking about kind of real life examples of what the client really wants, a small summary, and then questions. So please, if you can, ask as many questions as you want in the chat. I'm open to answering as many as time permits, and ask on anything, whether it's kind of low level, high level, whatever you want to ask, then hopefully we'll have time to answer them at the end. So what is this talk about? So what does the client really want from QA leaders? This talk is going to highlight and expand on the 6 key skills and qualities that I think every QA lead should show on client projects. Now, I've chosen 6 because I think 6 is a good number to talk about. There are a lot of key skills and qualities, and we could be here all day, but 6 is kind of the key in the very different skills and attributes and qualities that I really think we can dive into. And the main aim of the talk is to how we can improve as QA leaders and managers, but also at the same time to helping to deliver successful projects. So delivering successful projects ultimately is our aim when working with the client. That's what the client wants, but it's also what we want. Because obviously a happy client equals a happy QA team. An unhappy client, I didn't want to put that on there, is generally an unhappy QA team. So this talk's really going to talk around the 6 skills, but bring them down to the level of day-to-day life. Okay, let's start with number 1. So innovation. Excuse me. So innovation in QA is vital. So innovation is generally talked around design and being creative and development and UX and everything on projects, but innovation in QA I think is equally as important, and you should aim to create a culture of innovation within your team. So often QA is seen as something that's just at the end and a tick in the box to make sure everything works before it goes live. But what we should be aiming to do is to almost wow the client, show how fun it can be, show how exciting it can be, and really wow the client and show them something that they've never seen before. If we're kind of going in with the same approach every single time, then the QA will keep the same. People will have the same opinion of QA. We should try to change opinions, and we should try and wow them and get them excited about QA. There's no reason why not. And I don't just mean with technology and tools and processes. Technology and tools. I mean with processes and the way you behave, and everything that surrounds your role. So if we just to bring it down to earth and what we talked about the innovation, I've just come up with some examples of innovation in QA and in projects that I've seen and maybe I haven't seen, and I'll leave it for you to decide around these. So maybe things like, this is just to kind of get the ideas churning, 24/7 performance tests. So everyone talks about performance tests and load tests, and how about the idea of having a mirrored environment of 24/7 performance and load tests, combine it with UI tests, and really have a separate mirror environment that kind of runs and performance tests and mimics the traffic on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and you can foresee any kind of performance and load issues. Automated sprint planning sessions. I attended a great chat. I think it may even have been a community Z chat a couple of weeks ago, where somebody in their own spare time had come up with a way of fully automating sprint planning sessions and just streamlined the whole process from automating estimates and everything. It was really good. AI-based test automation is the new kind of buzzwords of 2020 and 2021, and using artificial intelligence to work out what to test, but also to almost write the test for us. Is it going to be the future that you basically press a button and everything is done for us? Who knows, but it's something we should be looking into. And now a few more left field ones, which I put a bit of thought into, or maybe you have seen, maybe we haven't. But how about 2 hours per week to swap roles on a project? What about on a Friday, the QA becomes a BA, the BA becomes the QA, the developer becomes UX, and really getting each other's shoes just to work out how we can do this. And an even more left field one. This is something we was doing 15 years ago, but not quite with the water pistols. But creating a bit of fun kind of in your team and having a build. And there's almost, why couldn't we hook up a build server to kind of hook into a Wi-Fi automated water pistol that fires water when somebody checks in bad code? It's obviously taking it to the extreme, but it's a good example of what kind of innovation can do. So continuing on innovation, this is a kind of classic. This is what we call the diffusion of innovation, or the technology adoption curve. So it's traditional. It was actually formed in the 1950s and 1960s to talk about agricultural practices and how people adopted to new agricultural processes. Just to touch on a bit, but then obviously in the late 90s and onwards from then, as technology evolved, it graphically kind of shows how people adopt technology and how we should be leaning to the left. So I'll touch on that. But essentially the laggards, if you think of this in QA terms, there's no reason why this can't be applied to QA as well, that we should be looking to be innovators. So all these kind of broader topics that I'm going to cover, think of them in QA terms. So the laggards are kind of resistant to change. This is the way we've worked. This is the way we're always going to work, and they're not that keen on changing. The late majority are cautious. They're a bit more logical, but essentially they're following the crowd at a slow pace. The early majority are a little bit more pragmatic, and you see kind of that percentage-wise, you've got 34, 16. There's a big chunk of it. That's how people adopted technology, but also in QA, is it right? Is that right? So if we had 100 people on this call, would the bulk of us being kind of early majority, late majority laggards? There's a great book that I recommend called Crossing the Chasm, which is essentially what we should be trying to do. That talks about technology, but the same principles apply to QA, that we should be looking to the left with early adopters and innovators. So early adopters kind of want to be trendsetters. They want to be seen as people coming up with new things, and innovators are that small 2.5%. They love trying new things. They're innovating. They're enthusiastic about new technology and new ways of working, and they're not afraid to fail. So I'm not saying that everybody needs to be the 2.5, but have that culture of that's what we should be looking for at any opportunity. Okay, and the next key skill is being T-shaped. So what is being T-shaped? So to be T-shaped, it's let's explain it in terms with the other kind of characteristics. So I-shaped is essentially you are an expert at one thing. You are brilliant at QA. Nobody can beat you at QA. You are an expert. A generalist is capable in a lot of things, but not really an expert in any. I think the phrase we have for that in the UK is a jack of all trades, but master of none. And being T-shaped, which in my view is where we should be going, is you are an expert in one of them. We are QA experts, we're QA leaders, we're QA managers, we're senior QA, but we're also capable in a lot more things, which is the kind of the T across the top there. and you may say it's kind of jack of all trades, master in one. Whether that phrase will catch on, who knows? But essentially, if you think about it, how often are you during the day on a project in a meeting with other disciplines? You rarely just in a conversation with people in QA. You're in a conversation with developers, with delivery managers, with tech leads, with solutions architects. You should be able to hold your own in those conversations. If it's an hour-long meeting, you shouldn't have to wait 45 minutes to just talk about QA at the end. You should be able to have opinions around how things are implemented, how everything. For me, software testing and quality assurance is not just finding bugs and not just looking for bugs. It's ensuring that successful projects are delivered. So if we talk about some of the disciplines here, and kind of examples, so these are kind of just 5 or 6 that I've pulled out around how we can be T-shaped. I'll talk about the benefits after this, but essentially, just to bring it down to low level and talk about development. So if you're chatting with a developer and they find out what unit tests they do, find out unit test coverage. If they're talking about refactoring is a favorite word of development. Find out what they're refactoring, find out how it benefits you, find out how it benefits the project. Really dive into that and then talk about that in the future. UX, you as a QA, you're in a unique position that you're acting like a user. So there are UX experts, but if you're using the application or the system, you see something that isn't working and as a flaw, and you think it's clunky and you don't really enjoy using it, raise it definitely, and raise it as, I don't think as a user this experience is great. Do not be afraid to voice your own opinions and be proactive and kind of question the UX experts. That's what they want to see. So delivery and Scrum Masters, help them out with delivery. If you think that, let's think of an example. If you're working 2 weeks Scrum, but you're more of a reactive team, suggest that you go to Kanban, give it a try. In my experience, if you're suggesting things in other people's disciplines, 9 times out of 10 they'll take it on board and give it a try. Suggest ways to improve. Business analysts and QA for me sit really hand in hand. If a BA is off for the day, you should be able to jump into his role and kind of help write acceptance criteria. You should be thinking from a QA's mindset, a developer's mindset, a user's mindset, everything. The BA skill is a really hard skill to kind of crack and become efficient at. But if you're aiming to be T-shaped, you should be able to kind of focus on business analysis. It's a critical part of the QA role, in my opinion. And finally, DevOps. DevOps is probably one more for the more technical team there. And it's becoming more and more popular and kind of sitting with QA at the moment with all the automation there. But have an opinion about DevOps, read about it, learn about Azure, learn about AWS. If you think that you are running performance tests on an environment that's too costly, have a chat with DevOps, see about spinning up and then tearing down servers. There are new DevOps tools coming out every day virtually. Learn about them and have a chat. The client wants to see you talking about these kind of things. If you imagine you went into a meeting and actually started talking about spinning up environments and tearing them down, and this will save you money, they will love to hear that coming from a QA rather than DevOps. They will love to hear all of these things coming from QA. And there's also many, many more, all the different things in there. So what are the main benefits of being T-shaped? Obviously, this chat is around what the client wants to see, but there's benefits for yourself as well. But benefits for the clients, flexibility. So you have the flexibility of if somebody's absent for a day, QA can step into that role. You should be looking to be comfortable and confident enough that you can fill that role for hours or days if needed. Better collaboration. Things are better when they're delivered collaboratively. Try saying that. Rather than just one person. So you should work as a team. The majority of projects these days are Scrum teams, so where they're kind of one discipline for each. Let's work together, better collaboration, and it's not just one person's opinion of how it works. You're also more creative. You become more creative as a QA and as a role and kind of in life. If you're being T-shaped, you're not just thinking about your own discipline. You're thinking about, oh, what about if I test this, then what impact will that have on dev? What will dev have to help, and vice versa. You become more creative in your tests. You know how things work under the hood. You know that if you're putting a load test, how much load Azure can take, vice versa. But also then the last couple for yourself, it keeps it interesting. So Nobody, in my opinion and in my experience, kind of just wants to be told, okay, you just write test scripts, you just execute tests, and you raise bugs. Nobody wants to be continually almost just manually regression testing. You want to be picking up skills. You want to come in one day and kind of chat to different people and really pick up their become. It's going to be hard to become an expert in all of them, but that's what T-shaped is. You should be capable of having conversations and having this, and that will keep you interested on a project for as long as possible. And also the biggest benefit for yourself is people will want you on a project. If you are T-shaped and you show that you can hold conversations about this, then your teams become more efficient, you become more efficient, people will want you on a project, you'll be in demand. Everybody will say, I want this guy, I want them on my project. Okay. So that is being T-shaped. So calmness. Calmness is a really interesting one. And there's a few good quotes there. And this is one I found around having the inner calmness and then automatically succeeding what you do. So there's a company called Talent Smart who are one of the world's biggest kind of research and development people. They've recently done a research where they've looked into 1 million different people. And they've kind of worked out that 90% of top performers have that ability to stay calm and succeed in what they do. And calmness is one of the vital skills. And calmness it's both a vital skill in QA, but it's one of the most important skills that the client is looking for. The client does not want you to panic, to run around crazy, to get stressed, to make everybody else stressed. Especially as a QA lead or a QA manager, you should be setting an example of this. You should not be causing chaos basically on projects or within your team. Calmness is vital. And calm leaders, this is what I'm kind of talking about, that they inspire trust and they help everybody perform better. So it's kind of it's trust from your team, trust from your client, and it helps you perform better and it helps everybody perform better. Okay. So this is a great image. So it's kind of so both Berkeley University in California and Yale University in America, not sure California, have been looking into kind of stress and calmness in leadership skills, and they've kind of came up with this diagram which I really like. So when we're talking about calmness, we're not talking about laid back, not bothered, bored, look like they're not interested in something. That is not calmness. And on the flip side, we're not talking about, I like the phrase complete meltdown, which is probably the furthest away from calm you can get, and having that kind of complete meltdown at the other side. There's research have gone in recently by those universities that a little bit of stress in intermittent periods is good. It's good for the brain. It's good for the brain to keep alert, and it's good to keep there. The key is, and I'm not going to profess to be an expert in all of these kind of things. I'm just touching on and how I deal with it. The key is how you handle that stress in short intermittent periods. For me, I quite like short periods of stress for the adrenaline to keep up, but at the same time, I try to keep calm. And throughout this, you can see kind of that chart. It's pretty easy to read, but just to explain, obviously the boredom and the depression on the left, when you're not stressed, your performance is low. And as you kind of increase, your performance improves. As soon as you're over that curve of kind of optimal performance and being stressed all the time, strong anxiety, and then your complete meltdown comes in. So it's a fine line of having that little bit of stress and to keep you kind of excited and keep you interested and keep you motivated, but remaining calm at all time. And I'm just going to touch on some examples of this in QA, and where we need to keep calm, and then talk about how we handle it. So, and actually, this is probably a good example to kind of use the chat. If you've heard some of these before on calmness, then give a thumbs up in the chat, give a plus, and calmness. Put in some of your tips around calmness or anything like that. It doesn't need to be just questions in the chat, and kind of talk around kind of if you've heard these before. So I've come up with 4 kind of scenarios in QA that I think people need to remain calm in, and then we'll talk about how we remain calm. So not enough time to test on a go live. I'm pretty sure 99.9% of us will have come across this, and not enough time to test. So somebody on the client side says, okay, we're going live at 5 o'clock, and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't have enough time to test that. Stay calm. We'll talk about how we deal with that, but essentially stay calm. The client does not want you rambling about how you've got to execute 500 tests in 10 minutes, and if we don't, everything, the house is going to burn down. You stay calm, and then we'll talk about how you deal with that. Probably the biggest stressful situation you can have as a QA lead or any QA on a project is if a bug is found in production, especially if we're talking about a P1. This is probably the scenario where you have to stay calm. If you're there, it's likely the client is panicking. So if you panic as well, then it's going to accentuate the situation. And this is again what I'm talking about. Calmness is not being laid back and treating it as it doesn't matter. Calmness is the way you deal with the situation. The site goes down during a demo. Maybe that should have said a test or a staging site, but this happens a lot, and it happens to everybody. And it's you stay calm. That you've prepared for a demo. You could be demoing new functionality to one person. You could be demoing it to 100. You could be demoing it to 1,000. No matter how prepared you are, if the site goes down for whatever reason, especially if you're on a test environment, the site goes down and in the middle of your demo that you've prepared brilliantly, stay calm. And finally, the changing testing priorities, which happens a lot, probably multiple times a day, and for certain people, or certainly multiple times a week, stay calm. Okay, and then I'm going to talk about how we stay calm. For me, I have a few tips and techniques around how we do this, and I'm going to share them with you. I'm not going to profess of how you stay calm. Some people like to go for walks. Some people have deep breaths. Some people might listen to heavy metal in the background of how they stay calm. It's up to you. I'm not going to kind of preach of how you should stay calm. Find how you can stay calm and kind of and work with it. There's just 5 little steps that I think you can do no matter how you stay calm, if that makes sense. So planning ahead. So in certain scenarios, you should be able to plan ahead and think, okay, I'm dealing with X. If Y happens, then I'm going to do this. If Z happens, I'm going to do this. Try not to be taken by surprise, especially on production releases or anything like that, or any conversations you have with the client. If you have an important situation with an important chat with the client, plan ahead. It's either going to go good, bad. It could go one way. Plan ahead. If this conversation, if they say this, then I'm going to do this. If they say this, I'm going to do this. Try not to be caught by surprise. The client wants you to stay calm and kind of have that plan ahead. Focus on one item at a time. So this is especially important for the production one that I've said. You could have a production release. We've all had them where basically 10 minutes after you've deployed, everyone said, the site's lagging, I can't do this, I can't do that, users can't log in. Whatever it is, focus on one item at a time and really kind of store that, whether you're writing all the bugs down, whether you're tracking them in Jira, whether you are mentally just keeping them separate in your head, focus on one item at a time. If you try to juggle 5-6 things at the same time under pressure, I think in my experience, you're likely to fail. So keep calm, however you deal with it, focus on one item at a time, usually in terms of priority, and kind of go from there. Be flexible. So this will help with the ever-changing priorities. If you're flexible, if you go into things thinking you're flexible, you will remain calm. If you go into a situation, say, I'm working on this, I'm not going to move, and then you kind of have an unexpected event, you will become stressed. You will stress the client out. The client won't be happy. Not a happy client, not a happy QA team. We'll kind of go back to it. So be flexible as much as you can. Trust yourself. So this is a really important one around kind of trusting yourself, and we'll talk about this in the next one as well, that you should be confident enough that you're making the right decision, that what you're doing is kind of, you should trust your skills, you should trust your opinion, and be confident that you can remain calm and kind of deal with the situation. If you lose trust and confidence in yourself, you'll become stressed. That complete meltdown is not far away. And use available support. This is vitally important and probably the most important thing in there. If you try to deal with everything yourself, if even in non-stressful situations, if you're trying to deal with everything yourself, you will not stay calm. You need to use the available support. In my experience, all of the project team kind of help each other out and support each other out, even in stressful situations. Cool, that was calmness. So now on decision making. So this is a really good one. I'm looking forward to chatting around. So this quote around, besides being born, the power of decision making is the greatest gift, is a quote from a guy called Benedict Arfield, who did a really good TED talk about decisiveness and decision making and kind of talked about decision making and just emphasized how important it is. For me, it really hits home around this. So he talks about how you you got where you are not by genetics and not by influences around you, but by your own decisions. And you kind of the decision making got to where you are at the moment. He talks about how thousands and thousands of decisions are made every day by your brain. The majority of them are kind of subconsciously and just made, but you make actively 5 or 6 decisions or more kind of key decisions every day. That is exactly the same in QA. He also makes a really key point around that. If you haven't made a decision about something, generally somebody else has made it for you. So kind of take ownership of your decisiveness and your decision making. It's exactly the same in QA, that QA, I'll touch on this in a second, have to make 5, 6, 7 big QA calls, and everybody on this call will have had to make decisions around QA. Even if you're a junior QA, you will have to have made decisions. And it's really important that you are shown to be decisive and kind of making that decision. The last thing a client wants to see is somebody who sits on the fence, if you've heard that phrase, and never makes a decision. They rely on others. They want to see proactive people, especially QA leads, around how things work. So I'll touch on that. Yeah. So kind of 2 or 3 key decisions that I think we've all had to make. I could have put honestly 10, 15 different ones on here, but these are kind of the key ones around when have you done enough testing? So when have you done enough testing is one that you can rely on stats, you can rely on kind of exit criteria, you can rely on anything you want. But ultimately, you have a gut feel around when you've done enough testing. If it's 5 minutes before release and somebody asks you and go live, are you happy to go live? And everybody's looking at you, that's a big decision in QA. So we'll talk about how we can help make those decisions. In the same with calmness, I'm not going to explain fully around, I don't have the silver bullet and the key around this is how you'll make excellent decisions. I'm just highlighting that the client wants to see you make decisions, and I'll come up with some tips around how you can make decisions. So when have you done enough testing? That's a massive decision. Is this a kind of for a good fit for the team? So this is really important around building your team and kind of expanding on your team, especially for QA managers. Once you've come off a call and an interview with somebody, 30 minutes, an hour, generally you have the decision, are they going to join your team? If it's a permanent recruitment, it's even bigger. If it's somebody to kind of augment your team and it's a contractor or pulling in a kind of resource from the bench, it's vitally important that you make a decision on this and you make the right decision. You don't want to be not making the decision on things like this. And I put when should we load test, but actually load testing is becoming more and more important. And it's not just when we should load test, it's what we should load test. It's how often we should load test, it's what volume we should load test. And this is a really good example of decisions that will probably sit with you, but you may want to pull in other people as well. Yeah. So again, with decision making, there are lots and lots of different ways. There's lots of great reading about decision making and decisiveness and how you can improve on a personal level. Again, have a read up about it and try and improve your decision making. But for me, I use 3 key steps, and I think everybody can use 3 key steps that kind of help them make decisions. Listen. So this is listen and gather information in theory. So it's listen to everyone's opinions. So it's listening to the data. So it's kind of get the data of what the issue is. If we're talking about all those things that we talk about, when have I done enough testing? Listen to the guys who've done the testing, get their point of view, gather in the data. If they've all say they've executed every test, they all come in beaming, high-fiving, thinking it's enough. That's data. You have to gather this data. You cannot make a decision without you cannot make a good decision, in my opinion, without this first step of kind of listening or reading or however you gather the data. The second one of weighing up your options around what you can do. However you want to do this, it's up to you. Whether you then write them all out on the board, whether you do it yourself, whether you use a team, whether you bounce ideas off. However, I'll touch on that in the next slide around different ways of doing that, but essentially you need to weigh up your options. Whether you can do that in your head in a split second, which would be great, you need to weigh up your options. Generally, every decision you make, and not just in QA, you always have 2 options minimum, whether you can do it. Shall I go out what kind of sandwich shall I have, is no different from should this go live, should it not go live, about weighing up your options. There's obviously different severity around there, but there's no difference. And finally, follow through. This is kind of where you press the big red button to say, yep, this is the decision I'm making. So you should be following through with your decision making and with confidence. So you should be following through with confidence, and you should have, again, it goes back to having confidence in your ability to make a decision, confidence that you've listened, you've took everyone's opinion, or you've weighed up the options yourself and follow through. Okay, so this is just talking about decision making styles. Again, there are books around this. There are great talks. I recommend having a look through them. For me, from my side, I don't think you necessarily need to be one of these 100% of the time. I think there are occasions where you are directive, where you can be behavioral, where you need to use an analytical approach, and whether you need to be conceptual. As I've mentioned, the client wants to see you making decisions, how you make them, and the way you make them. They will make them happy or will not make them happy. There are times to be directive and there are times not to be directive. If we kind of touch on what they are, so the directive approach of decision making is, as it says on there, you're direct, you're efficient, you make the decision almost by yourself, you inform when it's done, and it's there. So often people don't like that directive approach, but I'm trying to think of an example. Maybe there is a critical prod bug. There are two ways of doing it. Is it good enough to go? Your directive making decision is yes, let's get it out. You're results driven. If I release this bug fix with only 50% of it tested, then I know people will be able to log in. There may be other issues, but I want to fix this now and let's get it fixed. That kind of directive style suits for that scenario in my situation. You then have analytical, about using your information and facts to drive decisions. These kind of decision makings for me are around maybe go live sessions. So are we good enough to go live? You've taken your time, you've pulled in all the information, you've chatted to your team, you've chatted to development, you have a great report around we found 5 bugs, they're all low priority, we have 8% code coverage, 100% of the automated tests have run, and whatever. That analytical approach will help you make the decision around there. So behavioral decision is kind of more of a collaborative approach, and you're working with others, and it goes back to what I'm saying here about listen, weigh up your options. That one is you're getting buy-in from stakeholders around decisions, and it suits not for that kind of fast-paced approach. It's very much it's how do we want to work going forward. That behavioral, it's should we move to Kanban, should we do this, and you're kind of working with others, and it's that kind of behavioral, how should we work going forwards. And finally, conceptual. This is around kind of the creative approach and kind of future orientated. You don't mind what if this happens, what if this happens, and it's kind of, you don't use this as much in QA, but I don't see a reason why there are scenarios why you shouldn't use this in QA. At the very start, around what kind of QA do we want on the projects, looking back at the innovation, I think make some conceptual decision makings around this. So if I have a 24/7 platform, what happens? Should I do this? Should I get it to automatically put reports into clients' emails, inboxes? However you want. There are different options in there. Cool. And that is decision making. So that's 4 down, 2 to go. So questioning. So questioning is an interesting one, and I've put in there about the customer is always right or are they? As a play of words on there, but questioning is important, and it's vitally important on there. The client, in my opinion, has brought in and they are using kind of, I'm talking from EPAM terms here, but they're very much looking at you to be an expert. You're an expert, whether you're T-shaped or I-shaped, however, you're an expert, and you should be able to give your opinion on things. So you should not be, in my opinion, remaining silent on calls. You should be proactive. This one hooks in with the other ones. You should be able to confidently talk about other things, but certainly questioning is kind of the key thing. If you're questioning, and I don't mean this in a bad way, around questioning like why are you doing this and things like that, there's a style of questioning around there, around that really thinks and really sits well with the client. So if I have some examples of this, so what is the problem we're trying to solve? On client projects, quite often the clients they have a problem that they want to solve. They've had internal meetings with everybody, and then they come to you and say, okay, here we are, this is what we're doing, this is what we want, this is what we want. Your first question even if you know the answer or not, should be what is the problem we're trying to solve, and getting the client to explain the problem. It may even get them thinking around different ways of working and everything like that. The reason I say you may even know your answer is, as a QA leader, your team may not know what the problem is you're trying to solve. And when I say team, I don't just mean QA team, I mean developers, UX, design, tech leads, everybody. Having one single kind of source of truth of what the problem is you're trying to solve goes a long way, and it gets the client kind of on board that everybody's on board. Can we have some feedback from the last release? So this is a great question to ask the client. I like to ask it when you know the release has gone well. If you know the release hasn't gone well, there is a time and place for questioning, because you will probably have the feedback before you know it. If you've released something that you are uber confident about, everybody was confident, generally what happens is you release and then you hear nothing. If you hear nothing, generally it's gone well. But as a QA leader and kind of looking after your team, ask for some feedback from the release. If you know it's going to be positive feedback, ask it even earlier. That kind of positive feedback around, oh yeah, user A or so-and-so said it's brilliant, it's the fastest application we've ever heard. That kind of positive thing is really good for motivating your team, and it also allows the client to think that you really care about the system. So this one's a really key one of asking. It helps the team, and it also helps the client to think, oh yeah, Steve's asking about this, he must really care about it, he's one of the team. Have you thought about doing it this way? Is that interesting one that I touched on at the start of not why are you doing it this way? I don't think you're doing it right. They're not the ways of, it's essentially what you're trying to ask, but essentially, have you thought about doing it this way is probably one of the ways you can talk around, one of the ways you can find out information around why they have certain processes, why the development has certainly gone this way, why they come up with the decision. If you're in a kind of hybrid team with where there's some client kind of developers on your team, question them around why they developed it like this, why all of those why questions are really good to ask. And again, it shows you in the light of that you're interested in it. It shows you in the light of being T-shaped. It shows you in the light of innovation, and it kind of hooks everything in there. If you're working with other QA teams as well, ask them why they're testing this way. Use your expertise to say, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about running these tests daily? Have you thought about sending a report? Have you thought about automating the report? So questioning is a vital skill for me, and it's how you question is something that you learn, but it's something that you shouldn't be afraid of doing. Cool. And the last skill attribute I want to talk about is efficiency. So efficiency is in these times of post-COVID and everybody kind of working from home, it's vital, and it's probably one of the most kind of sought after skill attribute at the moment. And everybody is thinking, I want the highest quality of work delivered in the shortest possible time. So a lot of the work could almost be reactory to today's climate if they want to get it out and they want the highest quality of their. It's a really hard one to quantify around efficiency. There are kind of metrics of efficiency of a QA team and of a project team of efficiency of how many bugs they found per test case or per tester. But often that isn't a good enough one to measure for efficiency. Often the client uses gut feel. So if they think, hang on a minute, this QA team isn't efficient at all, they're doing this wrong. If you ask them for evidence, they might not always have it. Efficiency is often the gut feel thought from the client. Okay, one way which we can help efficiency, and which has become more and more popular for the last 10 years, is automation. Automate. I've put there, and I don't just mean tests. So everybody these days, when you start a project, the client says, I want automation. I want automated tests. Some projects aren't suitable for automated tests. The majority, you can have some. But when I'm talking about automate, I'm talking about automating builds, deploys, automating test runs, automating data migration. So if you find yourself pulling in data from prod to UAT every week, every day, try and get it automated, automate reports, automated emails, the list goes on. If you chat with the clients, everything you do, if you're first questioning, and it's going back to questioning again, can we automate this? Then the client thinks, oh my God, I'll be able to get things out a lot quicker if we do it this way. And it just gets the client opinion of that you are efficient and nothing is wasted. Granted, a lot of this you may not be able to do yourself, but again, it jumps back to T-shaped. Have a chat with a developer and say, I want to automate this data migration process. If your build and deploys aren't a deploy with a click of a button, if they take 3 hours because there's lots of manual steps, put in a meeting, have a chat with the DevOps, have a chat with solutions architects, and put in meetings to say, how can we improve the efficiency of our deploys? Everything affects you as a QA. You have that broad approach around efficiency, and you're in a really good place to kind of influence things. Okie-doke. The last couple of slides now. So we're talking about client pain points here, and this is from my experience of the last last however many years I've worked on projects, and these are client pain points around efficiency that ultimately they shouldn't be having, and that you can kind of remedy with a little bit of thought. So inflexibility. If you are inflexible, in my opinion, and certainly from the client's opinion, it's not great. You need to be flexible enough, and flexible, that word has come up 5 or 6 times on this presentation. If the client wants you to drop something to if there's an urgent bug comes in, you need to be flexible to jump on that. You should almost be flexible enough to work on 2 or 3 things at the same time. That kind of efficiency in this current climate is really appreciated, and it kind of goes down really well. So kind of moving to the top, so repeating the same mistakes. Not every release, but everybody has had a release with a bug in, or everybody has kind of worked in the same way where it's not been great. The key thing is not repeating the same mistakes over and over. If you repeat the same mistakes over and over, either as a team or as an individual, that is inefficient. You need to be using things like retrospectives. You need to do root case analysis. You need to make sure that you do not make the same mistake twice. If that means having a half-an-hour meeting every week around an internal retrospective, if it means talking, pulling together 3 or 4 people in a virtual meeting around why this bug got to production and trying to find the root cause, do it. Because if you get rid of that pain point, everybody's happy. So running the same manual test cases over and over again, I've had multiple conversations with clients over the years where they want to know why it takes so long to regression test. Why are we running all of these tests when we haven't touched any of this situation? It's a tricky one, because then if you miss a bug because you aren't doing that, everyone says, why didn't you run all of those test cases? So it's a fine line between it. But essentially, now we are where we are with automation and innovation. In my opinion, we should be using either working with developers or using tools that you should not need to run the same manual test cases 3 hours at a time just because you've done one little bug fix. If you do one bug fix on one area of the system, work with the development, use tools, find out which bit of code has been affected, estimate a 1 hour to test it as a sanity test, and let's get it out there. Work with the client on this, get their agreement. Don't do it under the hood. So working with the client on this, if you on the day you go live, you've spent 4 hours manually regression testing because you don't have the automation. If you find a bug, if you say, I'm confident that if we fix this by 3 o'clock, we can still get this out by 5 o'clock because I'm tailoring which tests I want to run and I'm confident that nothing else is affected, the client will love you. They'll love you because you're getting it out at 5 o'clock. You've been confident in your approach. You've taken on board all of these things. You've used innovation, you've been efficient, you've questioned developers, all of those. If you get rid of those client pain points, they'll love it. And finally, the biggest pain, not the biggest pain point, but one that I'm going to talk about is when I talk about too many bugs and too much rework, I don't mean in production. I actually mean too many bugs in QA. If you have a project with an estimate, it's really difficult to estimate QA, which is a whole new conversation and a whole new presentation. It's really difficult because you don't know how many bugs you're going to find. If you're estimating that it's going to take 2 hours to sign something off, you may find 15 bugs in the first 10 minutes. You may find none. If you find 15 bugs, it's going to take a lot longer than 2 hours. So this pain point of missing kind of deadlines because there are too many bugs and too much rework in development, that is a really good way to remedy that. And I'm going to touch on that now for the final slide. But essentially, I'm a big fan of the shift left kind of movement of shifting all of the testing left. And when we talk about shift left, hopefully everybody knows what I mean. But essentially, this old waterfall approach of having a functional spec, taking 2 months to develop, and then finally it comes to testing only for you to find a bug within a minute. Those days, in my opinion, should be on their way out and should be long gone. They're talking about that's almost the laggards approach on the technology adoption curve. Everything should be fast paced. You should be going as far left as possible And when I'm talking about that, you should be sitting with development. Developers should be testing all of their code. You should be sitting with them. You should be giving them tips. You can start testing. I was going to say in the dev environment, you can start testing on the local environment. You can start testing before they've even put in any code, before they've written one line of code. Sit with the developer, use your expertise, and the role is it's QA, it's quality assurance and quality and analyst. To get them thinking about testing before they even wrote a line of code. Get them thinking about it when it's on the local environment. Get them thinking about testing in the dev environment. In my opinion, and it might be controversial, the QA on a project shouldn't find many bugs. They shouldn't find many bugs. They should only find edge cases. The project where the QA is finding 10, 15, 20 bugs every sprint, it means there's something inefficient happening. Those bugs should be found before they've written the code, or certainly on the local environment or in the dev environment. They should not be getting all the way to QA. If they do, they should be kind of P3s, P4s of edge cases that nobody thought about. QA should be involved in kind of 3 amigos meetings with BAs and tech leads and working out how things work and how things test. And obviously the biggest benefits of that shift left are early detection of bugs, cost effectiveness, because you're finding it a lot earlier, things can get out a lot quicker, and smoother releases. Okay, and finally, to summarize, apologies for my little stick man, but essentially, if you tie everything in this, and hopefully I've tied everything together there around these 6 skills of innovation, of T-shapedness, of calmness, efficiency. I've wrote design making, but I mean decision making. They all help in everything. So that they all help make a client happy, a QA happy, and the project happy, which ultimately is the goal. So that kind of to summarize of the QA leadership, what a client wants. The client wants you to show all of these, and you do not have to be in that 2.5% of innovation all the time. You should be showing the client that you're thinking about it. You do not have to be laid back and calm all of the time, but at the right times you should be. And I could go on here. But technically, that's how I see successful projects being delivered. Cool. Any questions on that?
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Steve. You did really great. Your experience is awesome. Take a breath. We get a lot of questions for you to answer. Let me just read it. Okay. Someone asks, do you have any tips on how to make the silent but still responsible and productive teammates be more active and participate in discussions?
Yep, I do have some tips, and we just talked about that scenario. So I think you're right that happens quite a lot of silent responsive. Get to the root, have a chat with them one-to-one, get to the root cause of why they are silent. I'm pretty sure that 9 times out of 10 it's because they're not confident in what they're going to say. So use things that I've talked about here. Explain that the client wants you to be questioning. The client wants to see your opinion. Throw in phrases in there about there's no stupid question, there's no daft question, and really make them feel confident about that, and just emphasize to them that if you ask a question, nobody's going to laugh at you. If you want them to participate, that it's a team kind of thing in there. And actually, no matter what the question, the client will always be happy to have questions, and they want to know who they are. It's certainly 100% the client's pet hate if you have silent people there. If they're not confident in there, get them to ask the questions beforehand to yourself and kind of mentor them. You can have a kind of unofficial mentor on there. When I'm talking about that 9 times out of 10, in the 1 time out of 10 that it's not that, and they actually don't take an interest, and they can't be bothered, which is very rare in my opinion. Maybe they're not the right fit for the project, but 9 times out of 10, it's because they lack the confidence in what they're asking or what their opinion is. Push them towards being more T-shaped, get them reading up on subjects that's not necessarily QA, but really kind of mentor them around, make them feel comfortable in the situation.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Just a quick reminder for our audience. Don't be shy to ask questions. If you want something to clarify, please share your questions and put them on the QA panel. The next question from Irina. She asking you, could you please describe how to organize 2 hours per week, swap, mingle the roles if people do not know other stuff? For example, tools, frameworks, languages, and something like this. How to motivate teammate on such adventure?
Yeah, sure. If I touch on the motivation side, so 2 hours is just a figure that's thrown up in the air. It might be 1 hour per month, and it's on the innovation there. So the motivation side should come from trying something different. You will always get people who might not think it's a great idea, but kind of throw it out there. Maybe make it voluntary, don't make it mandatory, kind of however you want to do that. How you carve out the time, I'm pretty sure if a project's going well and you run it by, I'm not talking about doing this at uber stressful times when you have tight deadlines, but on a kind of business as usual project that's going well, if you suggest this to your delivery manager or clients and pitch it as 5 or 6 benefits that you'll get out of this that we talked about, then they'll go for this. When we're talking about tools and technologies, I don't expect the QA to then start writing Java code that they don't know about or start spinning up Azure environments. But maybe when they're swapping roles, they're actually almost virtually taking their seats. So they're looking at the processes. So they're looking at the whys they do this and why are we using Azure and why have we got it at this spec, and just kind of reading through some of the documentation and picking up that role. I mean stepping into their shoes essentially, rather than swapping roles and formally for 2 hours you are a DevOps, because you'd panic. But just stepping into their shoes, you could sit with another DevOps on the team and kind of ask questions and just focus that 2 hours per week, per month, or whatever in focusing something that's not in your role. Use that 2 hours as part of the week and kind of as part of your project. Friday afternoons are a good one to do it. Friday 3 o'clock till 5, swap, make it fun, make it so at the end of you have to do a little 5-minute presentation about what you've learned on there, and really kind of pitch it as a learning curve. Don't expect this as, okay, you're now sitting in my seat, I expect you to do a deploy to production by 3 o'clock. Do it as a learning process.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Because we have got a lot of questions, unfortunately lack of time, so I should just ask you the last question. Okay. How to train ourselves to know more into fields you mentioned in the slide flow effectively? User experience, business analysis, DevOps, development, and something like this.
Cool.
How to train ourselves?
Yeah, there's multiple ways, and again, it suits to how you feel you train better. There are so many things on the internet and training courses, and at EPAM about learning. There are so many things that you can learn in your spare time. Then whatever you have an interest in, learn about it and Google it and learn. There's so much reading to be done. Tools wise, there are often free trials of tools, whether it's automation tools or whether it's reporting tools for and risk analysis for kind of delivery management. There are tools you can try, but I'm a massive fan of kind of that third option, what I've just talked about. Set up a meeting. If you put 30 minutes into a solutions architect calendar, 30 minutes isn't a lot. Choose one that's not too stressed. 30 minutes with the agenda of, let me know what you do, let me know where you think solutions architecture is going in the future, let me know where you think I should learn. Use people's experience. You will be on a project with lots of other people, and you want to get their experience and all of their experience into you, so you can have a conversation. Go back to the asking questions. If you're in a meeting and somebody's talking about something that you don't know what they're talking about, don't stay silent. Ask the question. Just be upfront and say, guys, what is this that you're talking about? I've no idea. I've never heard of this tool before. Could you explain it? They will take the time to explain because they know the benefit of that. It's not a quick process becoming T-shaped, but it's almost a mindset that I want to be T-shaped and I want to know about these. If you want to know it, if you have that mindset, then the opportunities to learn will come your way, whether it's reading, doing training courses, or whether it's actively working on it.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank you, Steve. Thank you, our audience, for the questions. We have great upcoming topics for our conference today. I kindly remind you this session is being recorded. It will be available with all the materials by the link later. I would like to thank you, our speaker, for the excellent talk. And thank you, our audience, for your participation in the Community Z QAZ Days and this topic session. It has been a pleasure meeting you here. I welcome you to move on to the next day, to the next topic session, of course. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks, everyone.